The air in the great clearing was thick with the scent of pine, damp earth, and a nervous energy that made the hairs on Cora's arms stand up. It was the night of the mating ritual, the most important night of the year for the Silvermane pack. All around her, young men and women her age stood a little straighter, their best leathers and tunics brushed clean, their eyes shining with a mixture of hope and fear. Torches, stuck deep into the ground, cast long, dancing shadows that made the forest itself seem like it was holding its breath. Cora wished she could fade into one of those shadows. She felt like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a gathering of eagles. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't from an important family. She was just Cora, who preferred the quiet company of the forest and the gentle tending of her small garden to the loud, proud gatherings of the pack. Her simple blue dress felt plain next to the embroidered finery of the girls who dreamed of being chosen tonight. The ritual was simple, and that's what made it so terrifying. Everyone would stand in a great circle. The unmated wolves would then walk inside the circle, and if they felt a connection, a potential spark of a mate bond with someone standing on the outside, they would reach out and touch their hand. Most of the time it was a quiet, hopeful affair. But tonight was different. Tonight the Alpha King was here. Rylan. He was not just the leader of the Silvermane pack, he was the king over all the packs in the territory, a leader of leaders. He was strong, with a handsome but serious face that looked like it was carved from stone, and eyes the color of a stormy sky that seemed to see right through you. He was here to find a Luna, a queen. And every single person in the circle hoped his eyes would land on them. A hush fell over the crowd, so complete that Cora could hear the crackle of the torches and the distant call of an owl. The circle parted and Alpha Rylan stepped through. He moved with a power and grace that was unlike anyone else, his broad shoulders straight, his gaze sweeping slowly across the faces watching him. The air seemed to crackle around him with his own alpha energy. He began his slow walk around the inside of the circle. A beautiful girl with fiery red hair smiled brightly as he passed her, but his eyes didn't linger. He passed a strong warrior who held her chin high, but he didn't stop. His expression was unreadable, a mask of royal duty. He looked bored, Cora thought. Or maybe tired. Tired of all the pretending. Cora's heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy. She was tucked near the back, partly hidden behind a taller boy, praying to the moon goddess that she would be invisible. She watched as Rylan moved closer to her side of the circle. She could see the fine details of his dark tunic, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. He was so close now. She dropped her eyes to the ground, focusing on a blade of grass near her foot, hoping if she didn't look at him, he wouldn't see her. This was when it happened. A sudden, sharp shove in the middle of her back. It was so hard and so unexpected that she cried out softly, her arms flying out as she was thrown completely off balance. She stumbled forward, tripping over her own feet, lurching out of the circle and directly into the path of the Alpha King. Time seemed to slow down. The world tilted. Her hand, flung out to stop her fall, found the only solid thing in front of her. It found his hand. Her fingers, small and cold with shock, slid between his. His hand was large and warm and surprisingly rough. The moment their skin touched, a jolt like a lightning strike shot up Cora's arm. It wasn't a painful shock, but a powerful, thrilling, warm zap that exploded in her chest, making her heart stutter and her breath catch in her throat. It was a feeling she had never, ever felt before. It was like all the warmth and light in the world was suddenly flooding through her, starting from the point where their hands were connected. Rylan froze. His head snapped down to look at their joined hands. His stormy eyes widened, his mask of bored duty shattering into pure, unguarded shock. He felt it too. The same incredible electric current. It was a feeling he had been waiting his whole life to feel, the undeniable sign of a true mate bond, but it was happening in the most forbidden way. No one touched the Alpha King without his permission. The rules were absolute. A collective, sharp gasp ripped through the entire pack. It was a sound of pure disbelief, a wave of shock that sucked all the air out of the clearing. The silence that followed was heavier and more terrifying than any noise. Hundreds of eyes were locked on them, on their joined hands. Cora snatched her hand back as if she'd been burned, her face turning a deep, mortified red. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. What had she done? The Alpha's beta, a man named Jax with cold eyes and a sharp smile, immediately stepped forward. "My king," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "This is a great disrespect. She broke the sacred rule." He glared at Cora with open contempt. But Rylan didn't look at Jax. He didn't even seem to hear him. His intense gaze was still locked on Cora. He looked down at his own hand, then back at her face, his expression a storm of confusion, wonder, and something else. Something deep and intense that Cora could not name. He didn't say a word. He didn't yell. He didn't order her punished. He just looked at her as if he was trying to solve a mystery. After a long, breathless moment, he simply turned on his heel. Without a word to anyone, he walked away, leaving the circle and a stunned, silent pack behind. He left Cora standing alone in the center of all those staring eyes, her hands still tingling from his touch, her whole world turned completely upside down. The silence in the great clearing did not break for a long time after Alpha Rylan's departure. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of soundlessness, broken only by the nervous shuffling of feet and the continued, almost mocking crackle of the torches. All eyes remained fixed on Cora, who stood frozen in the center of the circle, a statue of humiliation and fear. The warmth that had flooded her from Rylan's touch had vanished, replaced by a cold dread that seeped into her bones. She could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, some angry, many filled with outright jealousy. She was an interruption, a flaw in their perfect, orderly ritual, and she wanted nothing more than to disappear. Finally, the spell was broken by the sharp, officious voice of Beta Jax. "The ritual is concluded for the evening," he announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. His cold eyes swept over the crowd, but they lingered on Cora for a moment too long, filled with a promise of future trouble. The crowd began to disperse, the murmurs starting up again, a low, buzzing hum of gossip and speculation. Whispers followed Cora as she finally found the strength to move, stumbling out of the circle and away from the torch's light, seeking the sanctuary of the darker paths that led toward the smaller homes at the edge of the pack grounds. She heard her name, snippets of conversation. "Did you see? Who does she think she is?" The Alpha looked so angry. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to become small, invisible as she hurried home. Her small cottage, nestled near the tree line, was dark and quiet. She slipped inside, closing the door and leaning against it, her heart still hammering against her ribs. The memory of the touch replayed in her mind on a loop. The shock of the push, the stumble, the feel of his warm, calloused hand, and then that incredible, earth-shattering jolt of pure energy. What had that been? It felt like magic, like fate, but it had happened because she'd been clumsy and foolish. She had embarrassed the most powerful man in the territory. Punishment for such a transgression could be severe. Would she be banished? Forced to do hard labor? The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. She knew Jax would advocate for the harshest penalty. He had never liked her or anyone he deemed weak and unimportant. Hours passed. The moon climbed high into the sky, casting silvery beams through her small window. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Rylan's stormy eyes wide with surprise, felt the electric zap of his skin on hers. The four walls of her cottage began to feel like a cage, trapping her with her anxious thoughts. She needed air. She needed to be somewhere that didn't feel so heavy with judgment. Slipping out her back door, she moved silently into the cool night, heading not toward the pack center but away from it, toward the royal gardens. It was a bold, perhaps foolish move. The gardens were technically part of the Alpha's grounds, but they were vast and beautifully wild, filled with night-blooming flowers and ancient, twisting trees. It was the one place of beauty that felt open to everyone, a place to think and breathe. And right now, Cora desperately needed to breathe. The gardens were bathed in moonlight, the colors of the flowers muted to shades of silver and blue. The air was sweet with the scent of jasmine and damp soil. Cora followed a familiar gravel path, her footsteps quiet. She found her favorite spot, a small stone bench tucked beside a burbling fountain, half hidden by a weeping willow tree. She sat down, letting out a long, shaky sigh, and finally felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Here, alone with the moon and the flowers, the weight of the pack's stairs felt far away. She didn't hear him approach. One moment she was alone, and the next a deep, quiet voice spoke from the shadows near the willow tree. "You couldn't sleep either?" Cora jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stepped into a patch of moonlight. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple dark tunic unlike the formal clothes from the ritual. He was incredibly handsome, with strong features and thoughtful eyes, but he lacked the obvious, intimidating aura of royalty. He looked like a warrior, perhaps one of the king's guards, weary after a long day. In her stressed and distracted state, Cora didn't recognize him. "You startled me," she said, her hand pressed to her chest. "No. I couldn't sleep." He came closer, stopping a polite distance away. "It's a night for restless minds, it seems." He gestured to the bench. "May I?" Cora nodded, shifting over slightly. She was wary, but he seemed genuine, and his presence was strangely calming. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the water splash in the fountain. Was it the ritual? He asked, his voice low. It makes many people nervous. Cora let out a small, humorless laugh. You could say that. It was a disaster. For me, anyway. Oh? How so? He asked, and he sounded genuinely interested, not just polite. The words tumbled out of her before she could stop them. It was such a relief to talk to someone who didn't already know, who wasn't looking at her with judgment. I made a terrible mistake. A huge public mistake. I accidentally touched someone. Someone very important. And now everyone is angry with me and I'm probably in so much trouble. She didn't dare say the Alpha's name, not even to this stranger. The man was quiet for a moment. An accident, you say? And this important person, did they seem angry? Cora thought back to Rylan's face, the shock in his eyes. I don't know. He was surprised. More than surprised. But he didn't say anything. He just walked away. It was his beta who was angry. Jax is often angry, the man said, a hint of dryness in his tone that made Cora look at him curiously. He quickly changed the subject. So you're not hoping to catch the eye of some important wolf? Not dreaming of being a Luna? This time Cora's laugh was more real. Me? No, never. That life seems lonely and loud. All those people watching you, judging you. I'd rather be here. Or in the forest. It's simpler. Quieter. People should just be able to talk. To get to know each other without all the rules and rituals. She realized she was being too honest, too forward with a stranger, and she blushed. I'm sorry. I'm rambling. Don't be sorry, he said, and his voice was softer now. It's refreshing. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I think many people forget that. They see the power, the title. They don't see the person. It must be nice to be liked for who you are, not for what you represent. Cora nodded, feeling a sudden pang of sympathy for this guard. It must be hard for him. The Alpha, I mean. Does anyone ever just talk to him? Really talk to him? Or are they all just telling him what they think he wants to hear? The man looked at her, and his stormy eyes seemed to see right into her soul. In the moonlight they looked softer. I suspect, he said quietly, that it is the loneliest thing in the world. They talked for what felt like hours. Cora found herself telling him about her garden, her love for growing things, her quiet life. He listened intently, asking questions, and he spoke about the pressures of duty, the weight of expectation, all speaking as if it were about a friend, never himself. The more they talked, the more comfortable Cora felt. The strange, heavy feeling from the ritual was replaced by a new, lighter feeling. A connection. She felt drawn to him, to his quiet strength and his thoughtful words. They moved closer on the bench as they talked, their arms almost touching. At one point, he gestured while making a point, and his hand brushed against hers where it rested on the stone bench. It happened again. That same incredible warm electric shock. It wasn't as violent as the first time, but it was just as powerful, a sweet, thrilling jolt that made her breath catch. They both froze. His eyes dropped to their hands, then flew back to her face, filled with that same stunned wonder from the ritual. A deep blush spread across Cora's cheeks. He didn't pull his hand away. Just then a voice called out from the path, sharp and clear in the night air. My king? Your presence is requested. The word hit Cora like a physical blow. King. Her blood ran cold. Her eyes, wide with dawning horror, traveled from the man's hand, up his arm to his face, to the intense, stormy eyes that were now watching her with an expression that was no longer just that of a friendly guard. It was the Alpha. She had been sitting here, talking so freely, so honestly to Alpha Rylan himself. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding with a fresh, terrified panic. Rylan stood up more slowly. He didn't look angry. He didn't look like he had been tricked. A small, very faint smile touched his lips, something she guessed few people ever saw. Don't be afraid, he said, his voice the same low, calm tone he had used all night, but now it carried the unmistakable weight of his authority. I have not enjoyed a conversation this much in, well, ever. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Cora felt her fear begin to melt under the warmth of his gaze. May I see you again tomorrow? Here. At the same time? Cora could only nod, her voice completely gone. With a final lingering look, Alpha Rylan turned and walked toward the waiting guard, leaving Cora alone by the fountain, her mind reeling, her hands still tingling from his touch, and her heart filled with a wild, terrifying, and exhilarating hope. The day after the meeting in the garden stretched before Cora like an endless, terrifying road. Sunlight, which usually felt warm and friendly, now felt harsh and exposing. Every sound made her jump. Every glance from a pack member felt heavy with meaning. Had they heard? Did they know about her secret meeting with the Alpha? The fear of Jax's promised punishment was a cold stone in her stomach, but it was now tangled up with a new, fluttering feeling that was equally unsettling. The memory of Rylan's voice in the moonlight, his calmness, the way he had looked at her not with anger but with genuine interest, it replayed in her mind, a small, brave candle flame trying to hold back the dark of her anxiety. He had asked to see her again. The Alpha King had asked her. The thought was so enormous she could hardly hold it in her head. She tried to lose herself in her work, tending to the plants in her small garden with trembling hands. The simple, familiar act of pushing seeds into the soil usually grounded her, but today her thoughts were miles away, circling the stone bench by the fountain. Would he come? Was it all some strange game? Or worse, a trick to lure her into a deeper confession so the punishment would be worse? She wrestled with these doubts all day, her emotions a stormy sea tossing her between hope and dread. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the nervous fluttering in her chest became a frantic drumbeat. It was almost time. Meanwhile, in the Alpha's lodge, a different kind of tension was brewing. Beta Jax had not been idle. He had spent the day moving through the pack, a whisper of discontent on his lips. He spoke to the important families, the ones with daughters who had hoped to be chosen. He didn't accuse Cora directly, not yet. Instead, he planted seeds of doubt. An interesting choice, he would murmur. A simple gardener. Certainly not the strong bloodline one might expect for a Luna. He spoke of tradition, of strength, of the need for a queen who could command respect, all while carefully painting Cora as a disruption, an accident, a weakness. By the time the evening gathering was called, the pack's curiosity had been carefully poisoned with suspicion. The air in the main clearing was thick with it. When Cora arrived, forced by pack law to attend, she felt the change immediately. The stares were no longer just curious, they were hard, evaluating. People did not smile at her. They clustered together, whispering, their eyes darting toward her and then away. She saw the red-haired girl and the strong warrior from the ritual watching her with cold, jealous expressions. Her heart sank. This was what Jax had wanted. She found a spot at the very edge of the crowd, wishing she could become one with the trees. A hush fell as Alpha Rylan emerged from his lodge. He walked to the center of the clearing, his presence instantly commanding every bit of attention. His face was its usual mask of stern authority, but his stormy eyes scanned the crowd until they found Cora. For the briefest second, his gaze lingered on her, and she thought she saw a flicker of that same softness from the garden. Then he looked away, addressing the entire pack. The mating ritual was left unfinished, he began, his voice deep and steady, carrying to every ear. A moment of chaos interrupted our traditions. But sometimes, he said, pausing to let his words sink in, the moon goddess works in unexpected ways. She does not always care for our rules. Jax stepped forward, a false look of concern on his face. My king, with respect, our traditions are what make us strong. They ensure our leaders are born of power and purpose, not chance accidents. His eyes slid toward Cora, making his meaning perfectly clear. Rylan's gaze turned icy as it landed on his beta. You speak of strength, Jax, but you define it too narrowly. He turned back to the pack, his voice rising. Is strength only in muscle and bloodline? Or is it in character? Is it in a kind heart? In honesty? Is it not the greatest strength of all to remain true to oneself, even when others look down on you? He began to walk then, a slow, deliberate path around the inside of the circle, just as he had the night before. But this time his path was not random. He moved with clear intent. He passed the red-haired girl who smiled hopefully. He did not stop. He passed the strong warrior who stood proudly. He did not pause. He walked past every single person who represented the old way of thinking, the ambition and the politics. The pack watched, their whispers dying down, confused by his path. He was walking toward the edges of the crowd, toward the shadows. He walked directly to where Cora stood, frozen in place, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. He stopped before her. The entire world narrowed to just the two of them. The hundreds of watching faces blurred into nothing. All she could see was him. You asked me last night, he said, his voice softer now, meant for her but carrying in the silent clearing, if anyone ever really talks to the Alpha. You saw the person, not the king. That is a rare and precious gift. That is true strength. He reached out his hand, not in a rush or by accident, but slowly, purposefully, an invitation. His palm was open, waiting for hers. The ritual was not finished for us, Cora. Let us finish it now. Properly. Trembling, her eyes filled with tears she couldn't stop, Cora lifted her hand. She placed it gently in his. The moment their skin touched, the electric spark returned, but this time it did not shock and vanish. It bloomed. A warm, golden light erupted from their joined hands, so bright and beautiful that gasps of awe, not horror, echoed through the pack. It was the sign, the ancient, magical proof that everyone knew but few had ever seen, the undeniable light of a true mate bond. It glowed around their hands, a visible testament to a connection that was written in the stars, far beyond any pack rules or ambitions. Rylan smiled, a real, full smile that transformed his entire face, and he gently pulled her closer to him into the center of the circle. He turned to face his pack, holding their glowing hands aloft for all to see. "The moon goddess does not make mistakes," he declared, his voice ringing with power and certainty. "She has given us our true Luna." The spell of Jax's whispers was broken. The sight of the mate bond's light was irrefutable. One by one, then all together, the pack members bowed their heads in respect, a wave of acceptance rolling through the crowd. Jax stood alone, his face a mask of furious defeat. With a sharp gesture from Rylan, 2 guards stepped forward and led the seething beta away. His scheming was over. Rylan turned back to Cora, his stormy eyes now clear and full of a warmth that made her feel like she was standing in the sun. The golden light around their hands faded, but the warm, thrilling connection between them remained, stronger than ever. He looked down at her, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. "It was never an accident, Cora. It was our destiny." He drew her into his arms, not as a king claiming a queen, but as a man finally embracing his other half. He held her close and safe, and as the pack cheered for their new Alpha and Luna, Cora knew she had finally found her true home, not in a title but in his arms. And so, under the watchful moon, a love born from a beautiful accident began its reign, promising a new era of strength and unity for the pack, built on the unshakable foundation of a true mate's bond. If you were swept away by Cora and Rylan's unexpected romance, if you felt the spark of their destined connection, then you won't want to miss what happens next in their world. Our channel is filled with tales of love that defies expectations, of powerful bonds and the magic of finding your true mate. Subscribe now and never miss a story. Join our pack and let's journey into the next great romance together.